I wanted to save this topic until after we go through loops. In this lesson, we'll be talking about the switch statement. This is another conditional statement used to check an expression against one or more values. This could potentially be used in place of an if statement with a lot of else if statements. I say potentially because there are some use cases where it really wouldn't work. But what we can do is, first I'm going to show you the syntax for a switch statement. And the syntax would be switch on, and then the expression, and then a code block, and then be when value 1, and the block of code that you want to run for value 1, when value 2, and that code block when value 3, and that code block, and so on. And then finally when else, and run that code block. So what this is saying is that we have an expression. The expression is pretty loose. We can have it be just about whatever we wanted it to be. And then we have the when. What the when is going to do is it's going to pretty much route based on whatever that value is. So we have the expression, it's going to output a value, and then when this expression equals this value, it's going to run this block of code. When this expression hits this or makes this value, it's going to run this block of code. So it's kind of routing based on whatever that expression is going to be and whatever values you are going to have as an output. If you remember the really fun lesson that we had when we were learning about polymorphism, we're going to bring back that query. And that query, what it did is it queried task. And when we queried the task, we brought in the ID and the who name, and then based on the what ID, so that the type of the what, we were able to bring back different fields. So if the what type was a case, we were able to bring back the case number and the subject. If it was an account, we brought back the name. If it was a product, which the API name is product2, then we brought back the name and the product code. So let's write that query out where it was and put it into a task list variable. So we have list task list, and then it was select ID who.name, and then we had the type of what, and then when the type of was a case, we then wanted the case number and the subject. When it was an account, we then wanted the name. When it was product2, we then wanted the name and the product code. And then we end. And then that's from task. Okay. Now that we have the query, let's say we wanted to loop through the query. For each record based on the type of, we wanted to debug a specific field. Later on we could do a different type of action. So really it's when we have the type of, based on the type of, we wanted to do X action, or if it was a different type, we wanted to do Y action. And if you remember, when we referenced the what, it returned an S-object data type, which means we can't reference a specific field within the S-object itself. So as we're looping through these and we're getting the what object that gets returned, we can't specify a field directly. And as an example, I will show what I mean by that. So let's say we had an S object. We'll go with a case. And then new case. And I'm going to create it with a subject of case subject. Now if I wanted to debug and get the subject, case.subject, this will return an error. As you can see, variable does not exist subject. In order for it to return, we first have to cast it to a case. So let's do case 1. And then a while from now, it'll be a little while, I'll go through casting a lot more and we can then have a discussion in regards to it, but I wanted to get us familiar with it. So as I debug that, now I get the case subject. So I can't get the subject if it's just an S object data type. So then what we want to do is we want to loop through the task list, and based on the different type of objects, we want to have a different set of logic. So for, and then we're going to loop through, so we need a task variable, and then we're looping through a task list. And then at this point, when we go through and get each task record, we want to get the task dot what, and that's going to return an S object. So S object task dot what. Then what we can do is S objects have a method called getSObjectType. And what the type does is that returns a schema object type. I'll bring up the documentation. For the SObject class, we see here getSObjectType. And on the return value, it's schema SObjectType. So that can be used as our expression because we want to know based on the type, then we can route it differently. So if we do switch on, and then we need to write our expression, but our expression is going to be, we have one of two ways in order to write this expression. What we could do is, and I will show you, if we do, I want to debug the case and show you what happens when we get the SObject type. And I want to see whether or not this is going to return true. And I need some method. So what I'm doing right here is I'm checking to see for this S object, which is a case, when we get the S object type, whether or not this will turn true if I use it as a string. And it does not. The reason why is because the return is a schema S object type and not a string. So one way that I could get the type values to be correct is I can use string.valueOf and then see if that equals case, which it does. We can see true right here. So that works. The other way that we could do is there is a schema class. So I could do schema and then get the case schema. And then if I do get sObject_type as well, this is going to return the same sObject_type for the case. And this equals true as well. So I can do it one of two ways when I start with the when. So first I want to use the expression, and I'll just be using string values instead of doing the schema sObject_type values. And hopefully this will make sense in a little while. So if I do string.valueOf, and then case.get sObject, oh, it's not case, sorry, it's sObject right here. Case was up further. Get sObject_type. And then I want when for the first value equals case. So if you remember when we did the string.valueOf, we were able to see and get a true expression for if it was case. So what we're doing is we're doing a switch on the expression is going to return a string of whatever the sObject_type value is. And then if it is a case and a string case, then I want to cast the sObject into a case, and then return or debug and not return case dot, we'll do subject. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to return the name for the account. So then I can do account. If it is an account, I can then cast it to an account. And then system.debug account.name. And then when we get product2, I can do the same thing with product2. PR2, product2, and that's going to be the sObject, and then debug product2, and we'll get the product code. Okay, and then when else will, it shouldn't hit this, but got to else. Okay, and now I can run this whole set. I'm going to first comment out these, just so it's a little cleaner. And we got it to run. So we had a couple of different tasks in the org, and we got the product code. This one I could have made it a little bit easier to read by putting in, we can do that real quickly, case plus, that way we know which one we are getting it from. Product 2. And I can see for the first record that we had within the task list, it was a product 2. Second was an account for Wayne Manor. Third was a case. And then the fourth one was a product 2 as well. So that's how we can use the switch statement to be able to then use an expression and then based on the values run a different set of code. So what we can do is we can also enhance this even more. Let's say that we wanted to then within this block of code, we wanted to update those S objects. What I can do then is we can create a list of S objects and we'll call it update S object list. And then we'll just create the new list. And then what we want to do is, even though we didn't specify ID within this query for getting the what, Salesforce tends to bring back IDs in SOCL statements, so that way you can reference the ID. Otherwise, we could put the ID and explicitly name out the ID within here, but we don't need to. So what I want to do now is I want to, let's go and take the subject. Let's say that we want to update the subject. So I can take the subject and updated subject. Then what I want to do is add to the list. And because the ID is already in there, we don't need to add the ID in again. So then I want to, we'll update the name and the product code for the other ones. Count.name is equal to updated name. And then the S object list, add count. Same as product code. This one is a string as well. Just say updated. And then add that as well. So now we have our updated S object list. And then we want to, outside of the for loop, because we don't want to update within a for loop, now I can update this list and I will debug the list as well. And run that. And we ran. And duplicate ID in the list. Okay, so the task is referencing the same product 2 ID. And so what we're doing is we're creating, or we're putting in an S object record twice for the same product that we want to update. What we can do instead is we can use a set instead of a list. We can add it to a set, and then the one thing, we'll call it set, and then we have to update all of the lists to sets. We cannot update a set directly. So what I can do is I can create a new list, sObject, and then put the set into that list. Actually, what I want to do is I don't want to do that because I want to be able to view and debug that list. So we will call it update sObject list. And then we'll take this right here. And update. Shoot, I have two news. There we go. And we can see that we updated product 2, the product code is updated, account, the name is the updated account, and if we wanted to, we could take this ID, we could go into the org, and we could check those as well. I'll just do the account. And then take the ID and put it into the URL. And we can see the name is update account. And that's how we can use switch statements to update a full list of sObjects.